Critical Thinking, A Path to Success, with Michelle Warren, College of Education, Stephanie Fink, College of Liberal Arts, Robert Jackson, College of Liberal Arts, and Max Fassnacht, Division of General Ed. Hi everyone, and welcome to Critical Thinking, A Path to Success. In academia, we talk a lot about critical thinking, but what would you say if a student says to you, "When you expect critical thinking in my work, what exactly are you asking for?" In this presentation, we'll share a model of critical thinking that we developed with the assistance of student advisors, faculty support and development specialists, and instructors across colleges here at Ashford University. As a result of this effort, we developed a critical thinking model that provides students and faculty with a process for applying critical thinking to issues and topics. We'll also briefly go over the research conducted around our model and share a website and some resources with you, as well as some great ready-made learning activities that you can easily embed in your classroom. I'd like to first take you to the website that contains the model and related resources. In the website, Critical Thinking, A Guide to Skillful Reasoning, we first address the question of what is critical thinking. We provide some background and then give you the definition of critical thinking from the American Association of Colleges and Universities, who say, critical thinking is a habit of mind characterized by a thorough exploration of issues, ideas, artifacts, and events before forming an opinion or conclusion. Now, there are a couple of important concepts embedded in this definition. The first is that critical thinking is a habit of mind. It's not something that you come to overnight. It must be cultivated and embraced. In other words, critical thinking skills are at first unnatural. They feel funny, but eventually they become habitual with practice. The other key concept to note is that one does not come to a conclusion before a thorough exploration of the issues. We withhold judgment. So perhaps our first impressions may not be our final conclusions after examining the facts and issues. Next, I'd like to take you to the infographic, which is at the heart of the critical thinking model. This was developed with the help of student advisors who urged us to provide materials that are easy to absorb and comprehend. What better way than an infographic? You can see by the infographic that there are 6 steps to the critical thinking process in our model. I'd like to briefly take you through each one. First is a description of the issue or problem. Notice that there's a short statement of this step and then some key questions students can ask themselves. Here, for example, without bias, describe the main ideas and events related to the issue. What definitions help inform the issue? What factors influence the issue? Note that the term without bias reminds students to withhold judgment at first. Next, we have defining positions. And we ask students to think about the common assumptions and also what do the experts say about the issue. In step 3, evaluating evidence, students look at the reliability and credibility of sources. In step 4, we compare positions for essential arguments and implications. In step 5, we are finally ready for students to formulate their personal position based on a thorough exploration of the issues. We ask not only for a personal position, but for evidence to support it, as well as arguments that might dispute it. Finally, we ask students to consider the implications or ripple effect of their position. In step 6, further questions. We acknowledge that no consideration of an issue is ever complete. There are always further questions and additional resources and ideas to explore. The Guide to Evaluating Critical Thinking breaks down each step into a conceptual framework. This guide was informed by our extensive qualitative analysis of over 300 discussion boards for evidence of each step to critical thinking. What you see under the column Evidence are the qualitative codes that were derived from the analysis process. These are qualities of critical thinking that support each step in the process. For example, if we look at the step Evaluating Evidence, we can see there are 3 aspects of that component: evaluating credibility of arguments, relevance of information, and strengths and weaknesses of the arguments. Instructors can use these elements to look for and reinforce examples of critical thinking in student work. The evaluation guide gives instructors a tool for prescriptive support in critical thinking, where students are given a process to follow. But more importantly, instructors can use the guide diagnostically to determine where students are in their critical thinking skills and where to take them to the next level. We think this guide is a powerful tool for engaging students in thinking metacognitively about critical thinking. For example, if you find a student comparing positions, you can take a step back and ask them about the credibility of the positions. Or you can go forward in the model and suggest the students now connect the facts in order to develop a personal position. We also have a teaching materials page in which all the resources and materials described in this session are available for download. We'll be discussing these in more detail throughout this presentation. In our study, we used weekly announcements as well as badges that faculty can award to reinforce and clarify each step of the critical thinking process. Very quickly, I'd like to share the study we conducted and our results. This does not include our analysis of the qualitative work we did in the study. Here, I'll only be presenting the quantitative results. In the study, we provided students with the 6-step critical thinking model, as well as reinforcement each week using those announcements and badges that I showed you earlier on the website. We examined 32 sections of early classes in the bachelor's program with 16 treatment and 16 control classes, covering 32 sections and over 650 students. What we found was there was a definite increase in the success rates in courses where critical thinking materials were used. Results included a 2% increase in final average grade, or, from another perspective, a shift from an average letter grade of a C+ to a B-. When compared to the control group, courses with the critical thinking materials also seemed to result in a 5% reduction in course fail rate and an 8.3 increase of at-risk students' grades to a C- or above. Now that you have a good sense of the critical thinking model and support materials and how they influence student success in the classroom, I'd like to turn you over to Bob Jackson of the College of Liberal Arts. Bob will describe how he makes use of the materials and the model to increase the quality of critical thinking in his own classroom. Bob?
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to present to you the critical thinking resources that I use in my classes. Over the last couple of years, I have received very positive comments from students on critical thinking initiatives. These comments track with the results and findings that we have seen in the study. Let me lay out the resources we developed that are posted on the website for your use. I use 2 announcements, one at the beginning of the class and one to request feedback at the end. First, I think students like to feel they are participating in a special program, so I let them know that this class is special, so I use these resources in every class I teach. I explain why critical thinking is important to them as they go through the class. When you let students know that students who participate in the program generally receive a higher grade than students who are in controlled groups, and they have a built-in incentive to at least read the materials each week. This announcement is where I introduce them to the infographic and guide. The final announcement thanks students for participating in the program and requests their feedback. Now let's go back to the teaching materials page where we have additional announcements and badges. We have prepared weekly critical thinking announcements as well, one for each of the critical thinking concepts that we are looking at. There are actually 6. I post these in the first 6 discussion boards as the first discussion post. I post them here as I believe that the students generally review my posts in the discussions, and it breaks up the announcements, as they are a lot if they are all posted in the announcement section. We have several instructor resources available for your use. Once you are familiar with them, it is easy to breeze through the evaluation for the award of the badges. The most helpful for me was the Critical Thinking Evaluation Guide. We use this tool to evaluate posts in our study. It clearly lays out what we are looking for while we are evaluating student posts. Finally, we make use of badges for in the classroom. I always complete my evaluation of student posts on Sunday morning. My goal is to set the standard. First, students must exceed the minimum standards for a post. They must cite their sources and demonstrate the use of one of the critical thinking skills. I changed the subject line for the instructor post to include the student's name, such as Sue was awarded the critical thinking badge. The badges are easy to copy and paste into the forum post. I generally start with 1 or 2 sentences that praises the student for use in critical thinking skills, and then include the badge and the description. Michelle goes a step further and copies the applicable critical thinking portion of the student's post and shows the student what she considers critical thinking. I reinforce the concept of critical thinking in the gradebook as well, and post the critical thinker badge, the last one of the badges, in the comment section. Finally, I recognize all critical thinkers publicly for the week in my weekly announcement that summarizes the concepts for the week and previews the next week. I thought it would be helpful to show you my timeline for all the actions in the classroom. This really doesn't take much time, as virtually everything is copy and paste. However, it does take a little organization. But the important thing is that we are always reinforcing the critical thinking concepts during the 5-week class. I would like to point out that the awarding of badges is a little different in week 4. As for the first 3 weeks, I focus on the initial post. So on week 4, I evaluate the response post. There's 2 reasons for this. First, I want to focus on the response post, as this is generally where I see students going to the next level in critical thinking. Second, it encourages students to post their response post earlier than the last day of the week. This encourages additional discussion. Then I return to evaluate the week 5 initial post. Well, this pretty much sums up how I use these resources. Needless to say, some students make use of these resources and others don't. But as a whole, I see longer and better thought out posts by all students. Students also comment in their feedback that they look forward to the badges awarded on Sundays. I want to turn you over to Max and Stephanie, as they have developed critical thinking assignments that can be included in the course. Max?
Thanks, Bob. In addition to the critical thinking tools that we've already discussed, such as the guide, the badges, and the announcements, we also wanted to create an assignment to support reflection and critical thinking across the disciplinary spectrum. So it's something that could be used at any class at Ashford, regardless of the discipline or class level. Many of our students are excellent critical thinkers, but a lot of them are pretty new to critical thinking and metacognitive processes, and so they struggle with thinking about how to think. Learning to self-assess one's own critical thinking is a really important part of the critical thinking process, and so we wanted to design a reflective journal assignment that could help those students in earlier courses understand where they are on the ladder, or even help them get to the first rung if that's what they need. So this assignment is pitched for entry-level students, but it's still appropriate for advanced learners. And since the prompts ask students to think about their own thinking, the assignment isn't discipline-specific and can work in pretty much any course. The assignment, it's ideal for weeks 2 or 4, but could be placed anywhere in the course. So the main problem which we wanted to address in this assignment is this lack of critical thinking that can occur in discussions and reflective journal assignments. This is a problem that all of us had pretty much experienced in our teaching, and I'm sure all of you have as well. And it's something that we noticed had been identified in the literature. But the literature we looked at also shows that properly structured and supported assignments can help students develop critical thinking and reflection. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do. This quote from Monica Kennison really encapsulates what we were trying to get at here. She says, "With foresight and planning, reflective writing may be an empowering strategy for facilitating students' thinking skills." So our foresight and planning involved the use of 2 theoretical tools. The first is Baker's 4-step model, in which students are asked to identify, describe, state the significance, and explain the implications. The second theoretical tool that we wanted to use is Stan's 3 components of metacognitive processes, which involve awareness, planning, and monitoring. Now, I'm a firm believer that tools like these should be a guide, and that rather than adhere to them rigidly, we should make use of them, adapting them to our own needs. So we took these theoretical tools and sort of threw them into a pot, along with all the other critical thinking tools, such as the steps to sound reasoning, as well as our understanding of what generally works and what doesn't with Ashford students. And so the result was this reflective journal assignment. So here you can see that this assignment is formatted using the prepare, reflect, and write layout, which we found to be very helpful to students, as it allows them to break down the process of completing the assignment. It begins by asking students to look over the steps to sound reasoning in the critical thinking guide. And then we ask them to identify the highest step on the critical thinking guide that they achieved in their discussion work for that week. We also asked them to look for a good example of critical thinking that they saw in another student's work, and then to think about what they will need to do in order to use the next level of critical thinking and take their critical thinking to the next step. You'll notice that we mentioned that their grade is not tied to the steps that they've achieved, but on the honesty of their reflection and the effort that they put into completing this assignment. So we'll come back to that later when we talk about the assessment, but it is important. So, and when they're writing it out, we ask them to think about which step on the critical thinking guide that they achieved in that week, and then also how that level of critical thinking helped them to understand their topic. We also ask them to do the same thing with another student's work so that they can see, how this opened up for them, and then how the work of their classmate also furthered their thinking and helped them think about the topic in a different way. And then finally, again, we really want them to think about what they need to do to reach the next step in the critical thinking process when they engage in the discussion for the next week. So you'll remember in the discussions we talked about how their grade isn't tied to the level that they've achieved in critical thinking that they identify for themselves. And part of that is this real tough question that we wanted to grapple with when designing this assignment that is raised by Bell et al. In their research, where they ask, will students reflect genuinely, honestly, and deeply if they know their reflection will be assessed? And so it's for this reason that the assignment that we have doesn't grade students based on where they're at, but how thoroughly they engage in the process. So here's the rubric that we put together. This is a standard waypoint rubric, and the point breakdown here is for a total of 2 points, but you would be able to adjust it to suit your needs. The nice thing about this is that both the instructions and the rubric can be readily implemented into your course without needing to do much, if any, design edits. As you can see, the main criteria, and the one that's worth the most points, is the reflection criteria. In order to get a distinguished score in this criteria, students must clearly and comprehensively reflect on the level of critical thinking achieved by themselves and a classmate, and the steps needed to further develop their critical thinking skills. And then as you can see, the scoring goes down from there, with a proficient score requiring slightly less of them, etc. The next criteria grades them on how well they address the assignment prompts. In order to earn a distinguished score for this, they must, quote, clearly and comprehensively address all prompts and provide comprehensive explanations throughout, with the lower scores in this criteria requiring less and less of them. Now, what is great about this is you can modify this rubric to suit your needs or address things that you want to see students do, but it's essentially ready to go into any course. So basically what you have here is an assignment that gets students to assess their classmates' thinking as well as their own, and it gets them working on improving their critical thinking. And then students are also assessed in a way that encourages honest reflection. And of course, the great thing about this assignment is that it's pretty much ready to go into any course with minimal effort. Both the rubric and the instructions are pretty much ready to plug in and can be sent to the ID team. So yeah, and now Stephanie's going to talk about things you can do in the upper division courses. Stephanie?
Thanks, Max, for sharing your work on the journal assignment. Now, in this part of the presentation, I'd like to present a framework for integrating critical thinking materials into your discussion board prompts. Incorporating these tools can be achieved by adjusting your extant prompts when updating courses, during course redesign, or when creating new curriculum. The links are at your disposal, as is the language suggested here today. The use of the critical thinking tools and techniques in advanced level discussion aims to promote deeper level appraisal of sources and issues to support mindful engagement in the course beyond the letter of the text. Here, the aim is to cultivate higher order thought by integrating the elements of critical thinking outlined in the materials presented here today into your discussion board prompts. This model has already been introduced in the history curriculum course design and redesign taking place this year and will continue to be featured in discussion activities moving forward. I'd like to take a few moments to demonstrate how you can easily integrate the critical thinking materials into the standard discussion board framework of read, reflect, write, and respond. While discussion board activities vary across disciplines, many classes follow the recommended framework. Each step in this process provides an opportunity to integrate critical thinking materials to help students cultivate an analytic mindset. I'd like to provide you an example of where to position critical thinking material links into your own discussion board activities as you design or redesign your courses. The first element of the discussion board framework is the read or prepare prompt, which indicates to students what materials they are required to consult prior to participating in the discussion activity. After providing the required materials for the discussion board activity, you can insert links to the guide to skillful reasoning. By placing this material within the preparatory or required sources, you can immediately set the tone for expectation, along with providing support to achieve these ends. The second component of the framework is the reflect, which provides student support in approaching the materials and issues posed in the discussion activity. Next, write provides the specific elements of the materials and issues students will present in their initial post. As part of your write prompt, you can again insert the link to the guide to skillful reasoning to remind students to develop an analytic approach to the material as they formulate their initial posts. Finally, in the respond prompt, students are asked to engage in dialogue with their colleagues to expand, explore, and develop ideas presented in the initial post. Here, I'm providing you adaptable language for this part of the prompt, specifically designed to move students to deeper engagement with their colleagues. This prompt includes another link to the guide to skillful reasoning, along with language that models ways for students to look for examples of critical thinking in their colleagues' work, which sharpens their own cognitive skills and helps them develop responses of greater depth and detail. Critical thinking work in the discussion board setting supports other elements of courses in a way that reiterates and reinforces the type of analytic thinking, writing, and presentation demanded by upper-level coursework. For example, the language and process found in the discussion prompts mirrors the reflective journal assignment
Max presented earlier today. Language and process and discussion prompts likewise cultivates mindful responses in open forum or reflective post settings. Finally, practicing critical thinking skills within the context of discussion boards enhances work on formal assignments. By using this framework and this model language and links, you can enhance the discussion board experience for your students as they aim for success.
Great, Stephanie. Thank you. Today, we've shared a model to guide students through the process of critical thinking step by step. Additionally, we've offered faculty several tools to support them in their quest to extend these skills to students. The Critical Thinking Evaluation Guide offers faculty specific questions and feedback that they can use in a diagnostic manner to identify where students are at in their critical thinking process and how to take them to the next level. The assignments and classroom materials provide course designers and faculty with ready-made resources that can be easily adapted to their own classrooms. Research has shown that these tools have the potential to make a difference in grades and student success. We hope you give them a try and let us know how they work for you. We'll make the PowerPoint available to attendees. It will include links to the critical thinking site as well as references and resources we use to develop this work. And last but not least, I'd like to point you to another presentation on critical thinking in this TLC conference. Kimberly Luke is presenting a live session on promoting critical thinking, effective communication, and an awareness of diversity. She provides additional insights on how to encourage and develop critical thinking in the classroom. Thank you, and please don't hesitate to contact us with questions, ideas, or feedback.